Friday edition of the Young Turks. I'm John Arola, bringing a power panel to you, and it is the most online power panel that I can remember because we're not only joined by the host of Deep Dive, the Twitch exclusive TYT show, Jordan Uhl. Jordan, very glad to have you here.
Thanks, John.
We also have investigative reporter for The Intercept, Kenneth Klippenstein himself. Ken, how's it going?
I'm hanging in there. Good to be with you guys.
Glad to have you both here. I've had both of you on my show, The Damage Report, I don't know, 85 times, but never together. I don't know what's going to happen. I really don't.
Unstable concoction, we'll find out.
Well, we're gonna see. But thank you for joining us. We not only have an awesome rundown prepared for you for this first hour, we're gonna be talking about some of the breaking news, including things like the NRA apparently going poof. We've got the MyPillow guy. We've got just a lot, basically. The current state of mind of Donald Trump that's not directly attached to people who sell pillows online. We've got a little bit of an update of where some of that money in the CARES package ended up going, so a lot. And also some truly vile attacks against Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. That's just the first hour. In the second hour, though, you can expect Anna Kasparian is gonna be there with a whole nother hour of awesome news, joined by Malika Jabali and Lance of the Surf. So 2 great hours of news coming up. If you haven't already, please like the video, regardless of what platform you're on. And with that, why don't we launch into some news? Big news of the day, not a lot of people I think were really expecting this. The NRA putting out a statement that they are declaring bankruptcy, but not necessarily going away, or at least the way they say it. They said Friday that they had filed for bankruptcy in US court as part of a larger restructuring plan aimed at removing its footprint in New York, bound for Texas. They say that they would restructure as a Texas nonprofit to exit what it said was a quote, corrupt political and regulatory environment in New York, which I think is quoting Trump. But anyway, they don't like it. That's currently where it's registered. And they say, we are dumping New York and we are pursuing plans to reincorporate the NRA in Texas. That's what Wayne LaPierre said. Hey, he's still alive. So anyway, we've got a little bit of speculation about why this is happening. We can certainly talk about what's gonna end up happening with the NRA, but they really slid in some big news on a Friday afternoon there.
Yeah, it seems like this is the kind of bankruptcy that is what the airports seem to go through every 10 years or so, and maybe not the type of bankruptcy that ordinary people undergo that has some kind of lasting effect. Unfortunately, I can't imagine them disappearing.
Yeah, Jordan, what do you think?
They're not going anywhere. I mean, it's not. They're just. I think the initial reaction to the headline, people were ecstatic, but it's ultimately to circumvent prosecution or investigation from Letitia James. And sure, Texas is a much more hospitable environment. Like Greg Abbott is never going to come after the NRA. Future Republican officials at the state level in Texas are never going to come after the NRA. So it certainly seems just purely designed to just avoid Letitia James.
Yeah, and if people don't remember, this isn't even that many months ago. We've just had this whole, like attempted coup thing in the meantime. But yeah, the AG for New York was looking into the possibility that they had, to basically take your pick of whatever corrupt use of their funds, using it for their own personal expenses, giving contracts to blah, 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 all that stuff. The surprising thing is that they had lasted as long as they did. I would imagine they would wanted that protection earlier. I guess they slid by on the fact that up until very recently, there weren't that many Democrats who were really willing to hold them accountable either, let alone the Republicans. I'm not a legal expert, and I assume because maybe it's different because these are financial crimes, but is it this easy to just shut down all the investigations? You say that you're gone and then you're over there, but it's the same people, the same board, the same name, the same employees. Is that actually gonna work?
They don't behave as though they're under an abundance of caution here. I mean, didn't they just appoint Ollie North director like a few months? I mean, it feels like a million years ago, but that was. This is not the conduct you see an agency or organization engage in if they have any sort of fear of retribution or accountability, I think.
Yeah, I mean, this is behavior you'd see from an organization or entity that is flaunting its status. They know they're pretty much outside the purview of any regulatory agency, certainly in this federal administration, but certainly in Texas. So if they were to go there, reincorporate, do whatever, they're going to be safe there. But it highlights a system that we have just like come to begrudgingly accept, where the most powerful, influential entities in the country just have no punishment, no repercussions for bad behavior, for protecting industries that have led to untold violence in society. When you have so much blood on your hands and you are this brazen in your disregard for any accountability, I think it says a lot about the underlying effects, the underlying society that it rests upon.
Yeah, and the interesting thing was over the past couple of years, there were every once in a while stories would pop up that seemed to indicate that they were having monetary problems, which always seemed so surprising considering how many millions of Americans are members. They were obviously much more so, I believe, in 2016 than 2020, big political donors and all of that. I think that's one of the things that in the end caused a problem. I mean, they're registered as a charity, but they're clearly making tons of money. They have their own media thing. They're funding political campaigns, and there were questions about where some of their funding was actually coming from. So if the move does end up stopping these investigations, I mean, obviously the biggest issue with that is the loss of accountability, the loss of justice, but even just the loss of answers, really finding out what has actually been going on there in the past few years. It seems like maybe we're not going to get any of that information, which also, like, I forget which of it was of you that said it, but I know a lot of people greeted this initial breaking news as they're shutting down. That's actually it. Even though in the press release that they put out, they're saying that they're in their best financial position for a really long time, which is sure, it could be lying. They're liars, but it doesn't necessarily look like that's imminently going to be happening.
No, unfortunately. This is they just ultimately represent the gun manufacturer lobby. It is going to be a lobbyist organization and a lobbyist group disguised as a nonprofit. They have a thin veneer of advocacy on behalf of gun rights, but ultimately it is to defend a for-profit industry, an industry that is led to just, again, untold deaths and blood on their hands. So this is they're not going anywhere, sadly, as much as I wish they would.
Yeah. Well, with that, why don't we jump to the other big breaking news of the day? So notice the director, I'm gonna jump ahead just a little bit. Donald Trump has lost a lot of friends over the years and especially recently. And we're gonna talk more about some of his frustration with his former loyal comrades a little bit later on. He does still have one guy that he likes to hang out with from time to time. And so literally on one of his last days as president, he had a meeting with the CEO of MyPillow. They sell pillows. It's Michael Lindell, and you can see here a photo of him leaving from his meeting with the president. And the interesting thing about that photo, first of all, is that the president's meeting with the CEO of MyPillow. But the second thing is that you can see his notes there. And you know that building is being watched by only about 1 billion cameras, and some of them have telephoto lenses on them. So yeah, someone got a close-up shot of his notes. And I don't know, especially if you're on mobile, I apologize. You're probably not gonna be able to read that. And it is cut off. You can only see about half of it. But even in just that half, there are references to national security, the Insurrection Act, Fort Meade, Sidney Powell, foreign interference, China and Iran, domestic actors. Let's see, we've got the word evidence there, election issues, cyber crimes, and martial law. And so, like, I'm not necessarily the best at, fill in the blanks, but I think I have an idea of what the other half of that is. And it's not good that the guy who wants to reassure everyone, no, you don't have to convict me in the Senate. I'm all about that peaceful transfer of power. Like a week plus after the insurrection is meeting with a guy who seems to be pushing him to potentially declare martial law. We don't know, again, we don't know for sure. We don't know how he was greeted, even if that's what he was coming to say. But Jordan, Ken, what do you think about this last MyPillow Hail Mary of the Trump presidency?
Well, I'm glad for one that the president has critical faculties to push back against what people are saying and not just kind of by osmosis, just absorb ideas into his thought processes that he's hearing bounced off of him by whoever happens to be in the room at the time. I just want to say, doesn't the MyPillow push of 2021 sound like some kind of gag joke that we would say on Twitter or something like a year ago? And now here we are.
Yeah, this isn't the first time that we've had some like hyper partisan actor come into the White House or leave the White House with their notes on full display. If you remember, we were just talking before the show about like stories that seemed significant at the time but are now fleeting. Like Chris Kovash went into the White House when he was trying to become a cabinet official or appointee with a list of notes about caravans and voter ID laws and all these different types of voter suppression measures. So here we are again, but this time the consequences are much more significant because it's ultimately anti-democratic. And poses a risk to our republic, but also it's coming from a TV guy who is like one of like basically the ballast of Fox News's primetime lineup because so many companies have fled that advertising space. So he is like subsidizing what has ultimately radicalized so many boomers across the country. It's hard to overstate just how influential Mike Lindell is, from a television audience to the president himself. This is like the Forrest Gump of politics right now.
Now, go on, Ken.
And a crackhead before all that, which I want to say, I wanted to like him when I heard about his background. You know what I mean? It's a letdown to see that this is who we get. It's just another, kind of seemingly corrupt businessman with a kind of comeback kid story. But here we are.
One does have to wonder. He gained all of this power and influence because he's one of the businesses that will still advertise on Fox News. Many won't, because of, leftists pushing these advertisers away. Did we create this monster by advocating for advertisers to flee Fox News? We gave him power by eliminating all of his opponents.
So this is my fault.
I didn't want to say specifically, but it's mainly you.
Yeah, I want to say we were just talking about the NRA, and I mean, I don't know. It looks like Jordan operates with some impunity on social media, kind of fury he whips up, and now we've got this guy. I don't see anyone asking any questions.
I'm sorry. Oh, come on.
So now here's the thing: we've got the MyPillow guy, and reason to believe that he's talking to the president with only a few days left of his presidency about declaring martial law. So, look, just on its own, that's worrisome, when you put it just a few days after a violent mob that briefly took over the Capitol, that's worse. But from what I've been reading, some of the specifics in here track with a lot of what the even crazier QAnon people are talking about, like invoking the Insurrection Act and stuff like that. That's a thing that they've been focusing on in the last week. And so this guy isn't necessarily just involved hypothetically in funding the radicalization of conservatives via Fox News. He seems, based on the evidence, we don't know for sure, to be absorbing some of that more online, even crazier than 4chan type radicalization as well.
Yeah, and that's especially troubling. I mean, we've seen a spike in that in general over the past several months because people have been cooped up at home, spending more time on their phones or online. And because we have these opaque proprietary algorithms that feed people information and are basically incentivized to feed people more and more radical information, it's led to this mass just brainwashing of millions of Americans that ultimately culminated in a substantial chunk of America looking at what happened last Wednesday, a scenario where thousands of people stormed the Capitol, shattered windows, beat someone to death with a flagpole with an American flag on it, and wanted to essentially overturn the results of an election, where a significant chunk of Americans saw that and thought, that's fine. Let's reelect the guy who inspired this. They don't care because they think there's this nefarious cabal behind all these types of things. I can't overstate just how disgusting these social media platforms are and these algorithms are, and then their effects, their corrosive terminal effects on society. It's really disheartening.
Yeah, and it's weird that when the social media platform finally says, okay, I'm done with this thing, whether the thing is, anti-vax rhetoric or QAnon or Trump on Twitter, like it often feels like we have this conversation about them being blocked on it. But the entire period before that, it wasn't like a neutral, like just neutral territory. As you said, these algorithms are actively pushing people to these things, even in the midst of campaigns where they say they're not. I mean, I had a reporter on to talk about Instagram apparently cracking down on anti-vax information during the COVID vax rollout. But it was still incredibly easy that if you searched for one anti-vax thing, you just got more and more pushed at you. So like this QAnon stuff, like a lot of platforms are taking it more seriously, but we have years now where they have been trying to get people to watch more and more radical content in those areas. And I kind of feel like it's reached this point where it's involved in Trump's final days. In any event, unless you had anything else, that's the big breaking news of the day. But we do have a lot of the other news that we want to get to. So we're going to take a short break, but stick around because after this, much more to come.
We get animated about the news. Yes, we're not the robots on TV. I actually care about the news. Guilty, I care.
Senator Sanders, I'm going to do something unusual. I'm going to ask you a policy question.
Hey, how dare you? That's the problem. You're the problem. Don't ever attack the Republicans. Where the is the liberal media? No. These are all establishment guys. They love the system as it is. They're all enormously rich off the system that exists.
For us, this system isn't working.
So what this campaign is about is trying to create an economy that works not only for the people on top, but works for all Americans.
We're gonna rock the boat. We're gonna be counter-establishment. We're gonna tell people the truth to the best of our abilities, and we're gonna keep it real with them.
It's winter, and it's cold this time of year, isn't it? Well, it might feel chilly, and the wind might bite at your nose. Maybe you want to snuggle up with a hot chocolate, or wrap up warm and wear your biggest coat. But in the grand scheme of things, our earth is too hot, and it's getting even hotter. Our seasons are getting confused. Lots of birds are nesting earlier, and spring flowers are coming out too soon. This is what climate change looks like. It's affecting so many of the things we love, both here in our own backyards and around the world. But we have hope because we know that together we can protect them if we act now and everyone does their bit. So this Christmas, give a gift of love and show the world you care.
How in the world are you going to get the right to vote if you don't already have the right to vote? That's impossible. Reason they tell you things are impossible is because they don't want you to try. It only took 7 years for that to get an amendment to get a right to vote.
Does this result in millions upon millions of Americans losing their coverage? And we've been waiting to find out, and now we know, yes, it will cut millions.
Public education was supposed to be the way to equalize everyone regardless of their socioeconomic status. But if you come from a family that's poor, how are you going to afford grade school for your kids?
This fight is about fairness and morality. It's about the American values.
You think that black people all across the country, in every city, were all lying when they said the police abuse and the police kill us when they should? No, of course they weren't lying. Yes, it does happen. Yes, they do get targeted more.
Why are we going to put immigrants in prison for 5 years, which American taxpayers have to pay for, if we're so concerned with immigrants using up our so-called resources?
We're gonna do both. We're gonna fight Trump and we're gonna fight the establishment. It's not that hard. Yes, you can do both at the same time. Go tell them.
ShopTYT.com has new shirts like this one. And you're thinking, Cenk, what is that one? I can't see it other than the black. Yes, so I'll show it to you. If you can read this, you're not practicing social distancing. Yes! Now, you were practicing social distancing. This is over video. But overall, you get it. ShopTYT.com.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Young Turks with Ken Klippenstein and Jordan Uhl. Glad to be on with you guys. We got some more news, though. Why don't we check in a little bit with Trump in these last days? The part of Trump that isn't meeting with pillow CEOs, anyway. Donald Trump's got just a couple of days left to be president. That doesn't mean that he doesn't have big plans. He wants to go out in his favorite style, people clapping for him. He's a simple man with simple pleasures. President Donald Trump's aides are putting together plans for him to enjoy the adoration of his supporters one last time before he leaves office on the day of President-elect Joe Biden's inauguration. Trump reportedly expects a big spectacle with a crowd of his fans when he finally exits the White House for good. The president wants the send-off to be held military style, according to CNN. I always assumed his exit from the White House would be done military style. But anyway, so look, I get it. He wants to have a crowd of his fans to send him off. My question is, can he have a crowd of his fans, fans send him off? Because here's a map of DC right now. And what you're seeing in this map are the new green and red zones that have had to be set up by the tens of thousands of National Guard soldiers that are there. It is literally in DC, there's a Baghdad style green zone with National Guard checking people's reasons for entry. And the green zone, by the way, you can only go into for like local business or whatever. The red zone is a no-go zone. So guys, I don't even know if he can have that exit that he wants because of the chaos that he wrought last week.
John, I don't understand what you're complaining about. Are you suggesting that there's anything wrong with Iraq and things didn't turn out well? Because I heard they have a democracy there now. And as for whether or not his supporters will be able to send him off, you would have to look at the National Guard and see how many of them support him. Maybe they do, and it'll be fine then. It depends on which of his supporters he's talking about, whether that's law enforcement or the actual just ordinary civilians.
It's almost too on the nose. Like he's leaving the way he came in. Presumably he would AstroTurf some sort of ceremony. Like he would pay people to perform, as he did when he started his campaign. He paid people to show up for his first rally as he descended the golden escalator. And it's just like he's going in the way he came out, right? Or vice versa, right? He's going out the way he came in. And I think if you were to do it in DC, that's the likely outcome, because this is a city that 90-some% voted for Biden, and in 2016, 92% voted for Hillary. There aren't a ton of native Trump supporters that live here, other than maybe like the transient Hill staffer. And I would imagine they've probably identified it's not the most prudent thing to glom onto him on his way out after everything that they endured last week. So he would have to AstroTurf some ceremony. That said, more than anything, I want them to give him a just blank canvas. Do whatever you want, sir. Rip off the shirt, show the Superman logo. Let's bring that idea back. Everything is on the table. I want to see Trump in his element on the way out, because it could only be, it's comedy gold. This is a guy who is so in denial that that's what he inspired last week. He can't comprehend that he lost, and that his life has severely diminished because of how vile he was for 4 years. So go do what you want, please. You are the creative director, Trump.
It's like a pet dog who's final week before you're putting him down. You just go crazy, have whatever you want. Treats every day. But I don't know if ice cream, but. Yeah, I don't know if you saw this, but Lindsey Graham he was touting a schedule he had for Trump in the last few days. I wonder if part of this is a sort of, if we keep him busy with this sort of stuff, then hopefully he won't do something worse. Because Graham was talking about, I had a whole itinerary for the president. We're going to keep him busy, McConnell. You don't have to worry about him going off the rails like he did last week. So this might just be them trying to keep him occupied in the final moments.
Maybe in event planning, that's possible. And the image we've sketched, and the one that seems more likely, is that this would happen at the White House. But apparently they're considering Palm Beach International Airport in Florida to greet him in Florida once he gets there. Trump is apparently unhappy with the idea of having to ask Biden for permission to use Air Force One for his departure. Just love that. He never calls him to concede, but he calls him to ask if he can use the plane.
It's a weird break from his traditional branding. Like he's pivoting back into private life, where he's going to presumably try to use his name and most recent time in the White House as leverage for new business developments. Why wouldn't you want to fly in on the Trump branded plane? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Yeah, the thing that doesn't make much sense to me, and not because it's not somewhat consistent with the way he's approached being president, but whether he thinks that he won or not, and it seems like he really does believe it. It seems like it, or at least he's saying it so much to try to believe it. He does seem to have accepted that he's leaving, unless his plot with the pillow guy works. But assuming the plot with the pillow guy doesn't work, he's gonna go. So he's got less than a week to be president. And I don't know if you guys saw, but his last 2 itineraries, whatever Graham says, fine. But the official one that's put out that he apparently dictated was Donald Trump will work from very early until very late, and he will have many calls and he will do many meetings. That's literally what his schedule was.
So he's watching TV.
But really, and look, I know many people watching this are probably like, ha, they like to laugh about how he doesn't do anything. And that is 100% true. That's been most of my life for 4 years. But he's president still. He's not gonna be president in a week. And he apparently has nothing that he wants to do with it. No last dips into the National Classified Archives to find out secret stuff about aliens or nothing. Nope. Like he wants to be president so bad that he came that close to a violent overthrow of our government, but he doesn't want to be president. He just wants to not be president, it seems like.
Well, like I was saying before, this is something that makes me want to like him because it's like the Office Space thing. What would you do if you could do anything? It's just nothing. I'd want to do absolutely nothing for an entire week. And that's what he is. That's where we're at.
That said, I'm fine with it. And I as we laugh, and I doubt he's watching this, but everyone around him, I hope, is just kind of encouraging this behavior. Yeah, you're really busy, sir. Because at the same time, Pompeo's running around with the head of Mossad,
right?
It's very clearly planning an attack on Iran. Keep him distracted. Keep him watching TV, please. We do not need a war with Iran.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Can you imagine if they launched it in the last few days? Jesus, we got lucky earlier this year. That's one of the few silver linings of the pandemic is that it lowered the tensions between the US and Iran, because people forget that this last year wasn't just the pandemic, it was the impeachment, and it was also we came that close to war. Everybody seems to have moved on. Anyway, let's talk about other people moving on. It's not just Donald Trump that's leaving the White House. His family is too, and what is going to become of them? Because it turns out it is just now dawning on people like Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump that having been affiliated with the guy who tried to overthrow the government might not necessarily be great for their future coastal plans. Sources apparently tell CNN White House correspondent Kate Bennett that both Ivanka and husband Jared Kushner are worried about what they're gonna do next, because last week's riots have provided horrific images that will follow them wherever they go. That has Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump in a bit of a panic as they look into their future, she says. I talked to a lot of sources today who say they're questioning everything now, from where they're going to live after the White House to what their careers will be. And talk about waiting until the last minute to question everything. You thought that it was a good plan to work in the White House for almost half a decade. And they're worried now about those images, but they were there for the whole thing. They didn't come in at the end. They've been there since the beginning. And so I'm actually of two minds about how much it will actually hurt Ivanka Trump politically. Socially, they're probably toast, at least in New York, I would assume.
Yeah, had it not been though for Wednesday's events, for the violent imagery we saw and this angry, frothing mob trying to break their way into the Capitol, they probably would have been fine. And it's only because the power of video and those images that they're now not there. As you say, they were fine as Trump deliberately and his administration deliberately separated kids from their parents as they sought to take healthcare away from millions of people that would have resulted in hundreds of thousands of people dying from lack of insurance. This is a purely disgusting, vicious, vindictive, and violent administration outside of national television cameras. But only because we now have those images are people going to separate themselves from that family. They had no problem in the run up to that. And I think it's just a disconnect for a lot of people, and especially wealthy people who would be completely insulated from any consequences to those decisions.
Yeah. Now, my question for you though is, I know that, I don't know when she says that she has political aspirations, I don't know exactly what that's supposed to mean. I don't know if she thought, like Don Jr. clearly does, that they're gonna run for president or something. And she seems like a pretty bad fit for the Republican Party. And she doesn't seem like a natural, she doesn't have the Trump thing, whatever that is. I know there's some people who are like, oh, he's got charisma or whatever. I don't think that she has that. But in theory, if she were to run for Marco Rubio's seat or something like that. In a red state, is the affiliation with Trump really going to hurt that much? I get that nationally it's a bad brand, but in a Republican state, I don't know that it's necessarily going to hurt her, especially after a cooling off period where people are looking at the Trump administration more holistically and rather than focused, naturally on the violence that just happened. What do you think?
I think that's one of the most delicious aspects of the Trump family is how they resemble. It's almost like Jerry Falwell's son, where they just have none of the skills that Trump. I mean, they seem as morally repugnant as Trump. But they don't actually have any of the skills that he does. And so they're sort of tethered to him because once he goes down, like you said, they don't have the, people say his charisma. I think it's clear as the sort of negative charisma. They don't have any kind. And so we're going to see them sort of flail. I mean, can you imagine what Trump Jr. also is going to have to do? I mean, these guys, they probably haven't worked a real job in their entire life. So it's sort of amusing to me to see how they're going to have to chart this. Because I mean, Trump is quite old too. They'll have to figure it out sooner or later, but I do think it'll be hard for them in the kind of blue states that they come from.
Yeah, I think perhaps politically, I think in terms of jobs, I am confident that they will not have to ever have a job. I think that we can debate about how rich they actually are. I think they're rich enough to not work, basically.
Yeah, I mean, Ivanka's probably going to be the most stable, and maybe Eric to an extent. The one who's really going to struggle is Don Jr. because he's clearly the dumbest of the bunch, and he's really like gone all in on this like, oh, did I trigger the libs type like worldview, where Eric and Ivanka always have a much more serious tone, and Eric's wife Lana is considering running for Senate in I think South Carolina, and Ivanka and Jared, Jared's got a portfolio of business properties and other endeavors and comes from a business and real estate family. They'll be fine. The one who's really gonna flounder is Don Jr. So it's gonna be a series of, I'm sure, like attempts to recreate Barstool Sports, but even somehow more racist, and just a bunch of like lowbrow books called "Oh, did I trigger you?" and like 100 ways to trigger the libs. Like that's his.
Oops, I triggered again.
He's like,
hey, that's a good one.
He's like the Spencer's Gifts of politicians. Just this shock jock garbage. And it's like, dude, you're like 45. Grow up, man.
Seriously, totally the Spencer's Gift. Okay, sort of related to this, we were gonna go through some different polling about how much the brain has been hurt, but I'm gonna jump to that last one just because hidden in here is just a little bit of maybe good information. I don't know. In terms of how much it's really hurt them for the Republicans, at least for Trump himself, let's go to this. Nothing says fun like looking ahead to the 2024 Republican primary, but I swear there's something here. So let's bring this up. And obviously, right now Trump is still number one at 42%. Pence, the guy he was willing to have murdered, is in number two. So that's going to be a fun debate. Trump Jr. is in third, but it's 6%. But do you know what I think is most interesting on there? I don't know if you can even read these, but the most fun number on that entire thing. And it's not Hogan at 0. Josh Hawley is at 1%.
Yeah.
He just stood with Trump like he was the guy. Cruz and him were the guys. The two guys in the Senate that did the most like, hey, end democracy, all that, the fun stuff. They're at 7% combined. They better hope that Trump gets banned.
The polling that came out today was astonishing. You're kind of seeing the numbers shake out. There's been some variation, I think, as people decide what they believe. And it looks like a majority of Republicans approve of what happened. The poll, I mean, it wasn't an overwhelming majority. I think it was something maybe like 55 or 60%. But clearly, maybe this hurt him, but it's not going to, I don't think it's going to be this sort of, just complete end for Trumpism. There's clearly still a constituency for that kind of stuff.
Well, the thing that's so weird about that is why would so many Republicans be so supportive of Antifa sacking the Capitol? I don't get why. What do they have to do with it? What dog is in the fight for them? The whole thing is such nonsense.
It's like a quantum state where for some of that they're both Antifa in disguise sacking the Capitol, but then for the ones who like him, he's not Antifa, and they kind of go back and forth. So it's a very complicated scientific property there.
Well, really fast. It's a perfect example of that. Obviously, the people who don't want to reconcile with the fact that people who agree with them politically beat cops to death say that those people were actually Antifa. The guy who got arrested for beating the cop at the flagpole says, no, I didn't think I was fighting a cop. I thought I was beating Antifa. And that seems like the most Spider-Man pointing at Spider-Man thing.
Right.
Like, who isn't Antifa in this entire city right now? Anyway, okay. Sorry, Jordan, continue.
Oh, I was gonna go back to the polling, but if you want to move on.
No. If you have thoughts about the polling, let's do it.
Sure. I mean, I think the Trump number also reflects like recency bias and a general sentiment that people just aren't over the results of the election. So I think that's something to consider when we look at that. It just seems like it could be an outlier, and certainly polling will change, public opinion will change in 4 years. Another factor is how Republicans are going to see impeachment. And certainly they're not going to look at it as a process to exercise judgment and act on their conscience. It's never going to be that with Republicans. It's going to be, how do we control power and who do we delegate it to and that kind of stuff. It's in everybody in the Senate's best interest to convict Trump because it consolidates power behind McConnell. I think you and I talked about that on Damage Report on Tuesday. McConnell could become the singularly most powerful Republican in the country if they vote to convict Trump. It opens up the door for Hawley. It opens up the door for Cruz. If they do not convict him, all of their 2024 hopes get dashed, or at least significantly and negatively impacted. So if you're looking at it from a pure, like, cynical political play, they're going to vote to convict him. They will turn around and be like, oh, we did this out of we're so conflicted. We're acting on our conscience. Today, McConnell told the press, this is a vote on your conscience. That's how they're framing it. Because then, just hapless liberals will see that and be like, oh, okay, wow, I guess, thank you, Mr. McConnell. I'm proud. I'm so proud to be an American. Thank you for standing up for what's right. No, it's all about power and consolidating power in their hands and gets him out of the picture.
I think you're right, but the crazy thing is the people who stand the most personally to gain from Trump being blocked from running want it to happen the most, but least want themselves to be the ones who make it happen. Like, there have to be 17 or 16 I'm great at math, Republican votes. And in theory, 4 or 5 of those could be in the Senate right now wanting to run next time, and it would benefit them. But is it gonna benefit them if Trump supporters remember them to the end of their days as the person who blocked their god emperor from running for office again? Between a rock and a,
I think people are just going to forget. People are going to forget about not Trump, but just in general. They'll fixate on something new because he won't have Twitter. He won't be able to inject himself into the conversation as easily as he could for the last 4 years.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, we are gonna go to break. Brett, you don't even need to, man. Same page, buddy. But anyway, we're gonna go to a break. When we come back, more news. I think that's what we'll do. I'll see you in a few.
Old school's pitched to me from Jank. It'll just be me, you, Jesus, Ben, and maybe Michael. And we're like, okay, cool. I can do that every week. As you can see, me, Jesus, Ben.
When you make the order, it says, don't exceed $20.01. So I'll just order literally anything to get it as close to that as I possibly can.
I'm sorry that I ordered $45 worth of food and got an email saying, sir, would you like to rethink that? What are you talking about?
I was in hell. I was just like, oh my God, the theater's empty, nobody's here. Everyone on screen keeps cursing. Why did I let this happen? And the whole thing looks like it was shot through a glass of milk. My mom's gonna be so mad.
If you're looking for a heart attack, the short way, baby.
Wrong. I did put mayonnaise on it. I'm the most in shape, overweight person you'll find.
That's right.
He was like, why didn't you answer my call? I called you 39 times.
Yuck. But what makes you stop right before 40? What makes you say, nah, man, I ain't doing that no more. I'm cool.
And I called you back on the air. And I was like, okay, Kevin Smith, big shot. What the you said you'd come on and you didn't come on.
I'm sure I took that very well.
Yeah, you did. You called me back the next day and said, I thought it was 7 a.m.
there's now deep fake porn. I don't know if you guys have heard of this.
Heard of it? I just had some in the car.
I'll tell you who I'm not f***ing, Ben Mankiewicz. Have you guys ever felt that?
Not ever.
And now it's just the three of us.
This is the intimate hour.
By the way, the last half hour of this, we're not even rolling.
Fair enough. Hey, Kingsley. See, I watch movies.
I'm done with both of you.
Once Greg starts laughing, I can't stop. And I was just going to ask you about getting high.
Snoogans, Snoochie Boochies, and members, of course, you can get the whole damn thing. TYT.com, join, and free trial. I'm old school with the old folks.
Good.
John, come back.
Electric cars are awesome, but they aren't the best tool for every job. You can't park them on the edge of the sidewalk while you run into the store for a few things. On top of that, an electric car is just financially out of reach for many people. That's where Zoom electric scooters come in. When I say electric scooter, I'm talking about small motorcycles with space in front of you to put your feet. The Zoom scooter has a range of 60 miles, offers a smooth ride up to 40 miles per hour, and can be charged from any electrical outlet. Start saving on gas while reducing your carbon footprint. To find out more, go to tyt.com/Zoom. Enter the code TYT50 to get an additional discount.
I'm Brett. I would like to refer to this segment as the Do I Still Have This Talent show. So I want to see if I can play harmonica without my hands. I don't know why I have that. Nothing's gonna be more impressive than that. I can also spin a basketball on my finger. While drinking, I'm gonna spin a basketball on my finger while drinking apple juice. You can do this, dude. It's also flat. I don't know if that helps or hurts. And it seems to be somewhat wobbly. Ta-da! Nope, I don't know how to do this one. This one's a fail. Nope. Oh God, I'm so mad.
Our community faces a never-before-seen public health and economic crisis. Businesses are calling Levin Papantonio with their legal questions regarding COVID-19. You've asked and we've answered. If you're a business owner and have suffered financial loss or closure from COVID-19 and have questions regarding your insurance policy, call us for a free consultation. Some policies may provide coverage for lost profits and earnings. Stay safe, and together we'll get through this.
Welcome back, everyone, to I almost said the damage report. Welcome to the Young Turks, everyone. Really fast, Ken Klippenstein. The world wants to know what would make Joe Biden a successful president.
Well, we're in an interesting situation where Senator Bernie Sanders is going to be head of the powerful budget committee in the Senate, and that allows him to do essentially what we saw happen in the last couple of weeks that may have had a decisive effect in the Senate elections in Georgia, which is proffer up these sort of ideas and say, hey, maybe we can do, $2,000 checks, maybe we can do stimulus that then puts the president in a very tight spot in which he has to decide, oh gosh, now I'm gonna look bad if I don't do this. Maybe there's some sort of moderated way I can try to pursue that. So I do think it's a different sort of scenario, and I think there are gonna be more players involved. It'll be less, I think this dynamic where Trump kind of takes the air of the room and determines media coverage to an overwhelming extent, that's going to be less true in this administration. But not just because of other figures, but Biden himself doesn't seem that up to it. I mean, how much have we seen him? You know what I mean? Like, he just is
not a ton.
Right.
Not a ton. Really fast, Jordan, what's up?
Yeah, just to piggyback off of what Ken said, I think on the budget aspect, we should seriously consider shifting to a more modern monetary theory worldview, where it's okay to spend more money on robust populist reforms, right? It's okay. The money is just numbers in the account. We are an issuer of currency. So I think that would be a step in the right direction. But also just to remind people that we can't compare it just to Trump to gauge Biden's effectiveness. So I would encourage, as we're already seeing justifications being made for apparent compromises on campaign promises, just by juxtaposing it with the immediate, most recent events in Trump's tenure, don't do that. Demand more. We have to ask for more and demand more. Otherwise, we're going to get the same neoliberal Obama era policies that led us to Trump, and the next one's just going to be worse. So demand better.
I agree. Now with that, let's jump into the last couple of stories of the first hour. And here we go. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez recently, sort of came clean with her fans about the experience of being there in the Capitol when the violence was happening, coming so close to this mob of people who probably to a man or a woman would have loved to have seen her die. And for a lot of people, that sparked quite a bit of empathy for the Congresswoman, but not for everybody, not for Tucker Carlson. Here's what he had to say.
As if you needed more evidence that it's all about what's good for Sandy Cortez and her friends, and not about what's good for you, because nobody cares about that. Watch her new position, her revised position on defunding the police. This is from the other day.
Many of us nearly and narrowly escaped death. There were members of Capitol Police who were quite heroic. You know, we have many officers, and there was there were also black and brown officers that were confronting white supremacists and putting themselves not just to protect members, but they put themselves in harm's way.
Narrowly escaped death. When the most harrowing thing you've done in life is pass freshman sociology at Boston University, every day is a brand new drama. Sandy's heart is still beating fast. But she likes the cops now, despite the fact they're white supremacists. What a difference a day makes.
Okay, so I made clear what I thought about this on the Damage Report this morning. I'll have more to say, but I wanted to let both of you get in. That is a multi-millionaire cable host with a massive audience who did a whole segment about how she shouldn't have felt afraid, and it's laughable that she did.
This is somebody who, when protesters showed up to his house and knocked on his door, delved into hysterics in response, Tucker Carlson, and lied to his audience saying that they broke his door. And when reporters just fact checked and checked police reports, no, there was no instance of property damage. There was no events as described by Tucker. It was pure sensationalism, pure hysterics from, like you say, a pampered multimillionaire. It's unconscionable to act like they are unjustified in being upset or traumatized by what happened. They were in a building with spotty information, learning of horrific new developments like panic buttons being removed, having their fellow members tweet out locations of significant members of Congress or important members of Congress. And what I can imagine they were thinking is, these people want to kill us. This is, as you've said before the program, John, these are people like Tucker and other Fox hosts have inspired their audience to want to kill. There have been instances of attempted violence by Fox viewers because of people they just saw repeatedly on Fox. If you remember the MAGA bomber who was mailing bombs to prominent Democrats, he was going off of Fox, targets, including Robert De Niro. There was no real connection to Democratic power and Robert De Niro. It was just that he had insulted Trump and Fox made a spectacle of it. His own lawyers argued in court that guy's day revolved around Fox programming and consuming Fox programming. So Tucker knows how they fed into this, and he knows the actual consequences, and he's downplaying, and it's very cruel.
Yeah. Ken, thoughts?
Yeah, well, I cover national security, and so I, talked to a lot of folks in the law enforcement intelligence community. I can tell you, that's what they thought as well. They thought that there was, mortal danger to, officials in Congress. And so I would say, are you saying that they're crazy too, to, overstate this? I mean, I'm not psychic. I can't kind of project what would have happened if they got there, but that's the point of view of officials and experts, and that's why they moved them to secure locations. So I don't know, it's just ridiculous. But I also want to point out, I think it's funny that Tucker is. What did he say? What was the barb? He said she said sociology in Boston University. This was the guy, he wore a bow tie until like a few years ago. Have we all forgotten that? That was what he was, Like you said, he's like this effete intellectual millionaire guy that he spends every one of these episodes of the show decrying. It's ridiculous how much he's trying to distance himself from that.
Yeah, and I love that, like, if they need to, they'll say, oh, look at her, she was just a bartender. She just did jobs like that. Now it's, I need her to just be a student. Tucker Carlson is insanely wealthy. Did you know he doesn't have creases in his palms because he's never had to pick up anything? Like him mocking anyone for their life experience is just, well, it would be comical if it wasn't so disgusting. That wasn't Alex Jones. You know, this is the big guy at Fox News who did a segment about how a congresswoman, we should mock her because she's afraid that she nearly died. But just part of his attempt to bamboozle his audience about what happened there. He also said it was not an act of racism. It was not an insurrection. It wasn't an armed invasion by a brigade of dangerous white supremacists. It wasn't. Those are lies. And he, by the way, might, he's obviously a little bit concerned about calls going around about how much culpability people have for spreading election misinformation. Fox spread hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. Come up with any conspiracy theory you want. They'll have a Dominion machine here. They'll have a shadowy figure talking through a voice modulator over there. And Tucker Carlson was engaged in that too. He was a little bit distracted by all the vaccine-related misinformation he was spreading, but he did spread some around the election. He said no reasonable person thinks that it was a fair election. But anyway, in case you're just coming into this, the representatives for the US say that Capitol rioters meant to capture and assassinate officials. We found out earlier today from the Washington Post that about 1 minute after Mike Pence was hustled out of the chamber, a group charged up the stairs to a second floor landing in the Senate, chasing a Capitol police officer who drew them away from the Senate. They were within a minute of getting Mike Pence. So this wasn't just a thing where they were going for the Democrats. They were gladly going for Mike Pence too, and it was very close. The whole thing is just so disgusting, and it's even more disgusting to know that not only will there be no consequences, just as there were no consequences after a year of Tucker Carlson telling people to not worry about the pandemic as hundreds of thousands of people died, but his role at Fox News has actually been expanded. They now cover his content in the morning shows. He's being put in charge of more of their news side, making ever more money as he is spreading just hatred and conspiracy theories and filth, and maintaining all the while this facade that he's he's a different sort of Republican, that he's a populist, that we should consider working with him, honestly. The whole thing is just disgusting.
It's disingenuous. I mean, he's shrewd. He's not moron completely. He's racist and he's bigoted, but like he can see where the winds are blowing, and he picks up on the populist trends and tries to speak to it. So I think that hoodwinks some more, gullible lefty thinkers, especially when it comes to like antitrust. But he's by no means sincere. His populism ultimately puts people of color, women, marginalized groups, immigrants, et cetera, on the front lines. Like those are the first people to go in Tucker's populist utopia. And I also want to point that line you put up on the screen in the graphic, every aspect of that was false. It was like every single thing is provably false. They were armed, like as you said, they wanted to kill people. It was an insurrection, and there were white supremacists and white nationalists embedded in the group. You saw a guy with a Camp Auschwitz hoodie in the crowd. Mm-hmm. There were fringe white nationalist elements in this crowd. To act like this was just some purely concerned citizen activist brigade who just got a little too rambunctious is purely insincere. But it is Tucker's MO. That's how he operates.
Yeah. They beat a cop to death. He's not going to engage with it. He's a complete fraud. He's a complete and utter fraud. Anyway, sorry, Ken, last thoughts on this?
I was just going to add, beat a cop to death with a Blue Lives Matter flag in view of the camera. I mean, I can't think of anything that embodies more the just bundle of contradictions at work in this kind of a movement than that harrowing image.
I agree. Okay, let's move on to our last story before we close things out. In the wake of the CARES Act, there were a lot of concerns that with so much money going out the door and with the Trump administration being the ones who are going to be divvying it out, there's probably going to be some corruption. There's probably going to be some organizations that are getting the money that don't deserve it. And ever since then, what do you know? There's been a lot of good reporting about the sorts of companies that were actually getting that money. Well, now you can add another group to that, and that is debt collectors and payday lenders, some of whom have faced tons of complaints, have had to pay large fines for the way they've mistreated and broken the law in terms of their relationships with their customers. They were able to cash in quite a bit. There were more than 1,800 loans that went to debt collectors and high interest lenders through the Paycheck Protection Program. In all, the aid to these businesses amounted to more than $580 million. More than 170 of those recipients have been the subject of a multitude of complaints, each racking up at least 100 with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. 25 have been subject to legal enforcement or consumer alerts, many by the CFPB and the Federal Trade Commission. As just one example, the National Credit Adjusters, a Kansas firm that provides debt collection services, received $1.5 million. Back in July of 2018, the company agreed to pay a $500,000 civil penalty to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau after the federal agency found it had used a network of companies that engaged in frequent unlawful debt collection acts. The companies told consumers they owed more than they were legally required to pay and threatened them and their families with lawsuits and arrests. So they paid that fine, then they bide their time, and they're able to collect a bunch of money that in theory they might not even have to pay back. And there's a lot of other examples like that. And the Washington Post has some great details, but what'd you guys think?
I mean, what can you say? Just the scummiest, I mean, this is like the worst crisis since the Great Depression. What do? You're just kicking people in the teeth. I don't even know what to say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is like peak America. Like this is in reality the American dream. It's where companies that their entire business operation is just to be a parasite on society, to just suck the life out of whatever's left, this husk that we've just hollowed out, to just shovel money to the billionaire class and the ruling class. Whatever's left is just these leeches just glomming on to people who are struggling. People are struggling to make ends meet. That's who really uses payday lenders. And they are subject to extremely high and disproportionate APRs. They're subject to variable APRs and all these different parasitic and predatory lending practices, and just further buries them in debt just because they need to pay rent or pay groceries. These are the people who need help the most, the people who rely on payday lenders just to get by. And get no help from the government when it comes down to it. It's, here's $1,200. Make it last 8 months. How is that supposed to work? What are they supposed to do? No debt forgiveness for people who are behind on their rent. No jubilee for the debt that's been racked up during this entire period. But the people who are bearing you in private debt, yeah, we'll help them. It's just that is the American capitalist system in work.
Yeah, and we were lucky enough that in some places, thanks to pressure, both eviction and foreclosure moratoriums happened. Those lapsed in a lot of areas. But unless there is forgiveness, all it is putting off the date that many Americans will eventually lose the place they live. And it seems like, I understand people work at some of these places, some of them are just regular good people. The idea that we have to make sure that the debt collectors are ready to go as soon as those moratoriums fall, I agree with you. It just feels like ultimate America. Like we have to make sure that the predators are waiting when the protections finally end. Anyway, that was a rough hour of news, but thank you to both of you for joining me. Ken, where can people read more of your investigative reporting?
I'm at The Intercept now, and if you need to reach out to me, I've got my Signal and my Twitter account, so you can text me securely there.
Awesome. And Jordan, I hear there's another episode of Deep Dive coming up soon.
Tuesday at 2:30 Eastern on Twitch, on TYT's Twitch exclusively.
Do you know who the guest is for that one yet?
Haven't decided yet.
Oh, okay. Sorry,
I'll figure it out.
He's got so many people just beating down.
Well, I like to keep it current. Get off my back, Ken.
Oh, come on, get the MyPillow guy.
Okay, I'll reach out just for you.
He wants that publicity. Anyway, we're gonna take a short break. When we come back, Anna Kasparian is gonna be taking over for another awesome hour of the news, joined by Malika Jabali and Lance of the Surfs. So you're definitely not gonna miss it. See you in just a few.
We get animated about the news. Yes, we're not the robots on TV. I actually care about the news. Guilty, I care.
Senator Sanders, I'm going to do something unusual. I'm going to ask you a policy question.
How dare you? That's the problem. You're the problem. Don't ever attack the Republicans. Where the is the liberal media? No. These are all establishment guys. They love the system as it is. They're all enormously rich, off the system that exists.
For us, this system isn't working.
So what this campaign is about is trying to create an economy that works not only for the people on top, but works for all Americans.
We're gonna rock the boat. We're gonna be counter-establishment. We're gonna tell people the truth to the best of our abilities, and we're gonna keep it real with them.
It's winter, and it's cold this time of year, isn't it? Well, it might feel chilly, and the wind might bite at your nose. Maybe you want to snuggle up with a hot chocolate, or wrap up warm and wear your biggest coat. But in the grand scheme of things, our earth is too hot, and it's getting even hotter. Our seasons are getting confused. Lots of birds are nesting earlier, and spring flowers are coming out too soon. This is what climate change looks like. It's affecting so many of the things we love, both here in our own backyards and around the world. But we have hope because we know that together we can protect them if we act now and everyone does their bit. So this Christmas, give a gift of love and show the world you care.
How in the world are you going to get the right to vote if you don't already have the right to vote? That's impossible. Reason they tell you things are impossible is because they don't want you to try. It only took 7 years for them to get an amendment to get a right to vote.
Does this result in millions upon millions of Americans losing their coverage? And we've been waiting to find out, and now we know, yes, it will cut millions.
Public education was supposed to be the way to equalize everyone regardless of their socioeconomic status. But if you come from a family that's poor, how are you going to afford grade school for your kids?
This fight is about fairness and morality. It's about the American values.
You think that black people all across the country, in every city, were all lying when they said the police abuse and the police kill us when they should? No, of course they weren't lying. Yes, it does happen. Yes, they do get targeted more.
Why are we going to put immigrants in prison for 5 years, which American taxpayers have to pay for if we're so concerned with immigrants using up our so-called resources?
We're gonna do both. We're gonna fight Trump and we're gonna fight the establishment. It's not that hard. Yes, you can do both at the same time. Go tell them.
ShopTYT.com has new shirts like this one. And you're thinking, Cenk, what is that one? I can't see it other than the black. Yes, so I'll show it to you. If you can read this, you're not practicing social distancing. Yes! Now, you were practicing social distancing. This is over video. But overall, you get it. ShopTYT.com.
Welcome to the Young Turks, everyone, with a whole new power panel. Joining us now is Malaika Jabali. I'm sure you guys have seen her on the show before, or some of the other work that she's done on shows like TMBS. You've been on so many other shows in this progressive space. So thank you for coming back, Malaika. It's a pleasure to have you. And for the first time on our show, we have Lance of the Serfs. And so you can find him and his work over at twitch.tv/TheSerfsTV. And by the way, Malaika Jabali is also a writer, attorney, and activist. So really a pleasure to have you guys here. I'm really looking forward to hearing what you have to say with some of the stories and some of the news going on right now. And one of the things that I think has kind of fell by the wayside is coronavirus. You see stories here and there, but obviously with the Capitol riots, that story's been pushed to the side. And I really wanted to talk about the importance of having a plan in place for vaccine distribution. And luckily, former Vice President, and now President-elect Joe Biden has outlined his game plan. So let's talk about it. President-elect Joe Biden has outlined his game plan when it comes to the coronavirus vaccine, how he intends on increasing the production of the vaccine, and more importantly, how he plans to distribute the vaccine. Now, he's coming at this from a far more centralized approach compared to what we've seen or really haven't seen from Donald Trump. And that's good news. Now, there are some critiques regarding what his plan is, but we'll get into those critiques in just a minute. Why don't we hear what President-elect Biden has to say, and then we'll give you more details.
The vaccine rollout in the United States has been a dismal failure thus far. Tomorrow, I will lay out our vaccination plan to correct course and meet our goal of 100 million shots at the end of my first 100 days as president. This will be one of the most challenging operational efforts we have ever undertaken as a nation. We'll have to move heaven and earth to get more people vaccinated, to create more places for them to get vaccinated, to mobilize more medical teams to get shots in people's arms, to increase vaccine supply, and to get it out the door as fast as possible. We'll also do everything we can to keep our educators and students safe, to safely reopen a majority of our K-8 schools by the end of the first 100 days.
Okay, so just to recap, what he really wants to focus on is essentially releasing all of the available doses of the coronavirus vaccine right away. Currently, what is happening under the Trump administration is they're holding on to, or have been holding on to, the second dose of the vaccine to ensure that individuals who have already gotten the first shot then get access to the second shot and don't run into the problem of not being able to because they've run out of the vaccine. But Biden argues that he's actually going to invoke the Defense Authorization Act the Defense Production Act in order to increase the availability of the vaccine, the production of the vaccine. And then what he's gonna do after that is essentially open these federally run vaccination sites in places like high school gyms, sports stadiums, and one other aspect of his plan that I think is so important has to do with mobile units that can reach out to rural communities or maybe disabled individuals who aren't as mobile and can't go to these federally run sites in order to get the vaccine that they need. But as you heard in that video, and I'd like to reiterate, the president-elect has vowed to get at least 100 million COVID vaccine shots in the arms of the American people during the first 100 days in office. Now, there have been some health experts who argue that that's not enough, but I do like that he's coming at this from a much more organized and centralized approach. But I'm curious to hear what you guys have to say. So Malaika, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I'm not a public health expert, but what I do is observe policy and observe administrations. And I think obviously Joe Biden doing this, he's listening to some public experts. As you mentioned before, there are some critiques about that in terms of whether or not the second dosage is going to be effective because there might be too much time that's passed in between. And so I think that's up to public experts to weigh in on that. But what this really speaks to me is the fact that we haven't had a centralized effort up until this point. And so this, to me, goes beyond a Biden and Trump comparison. Obviously, we know that Joe Biden, just based on what he's promised, is doing a lot more to centralize these vaccinations. But when you have had a government, when you've had our federal system that has not invested in the public sector, that has not invested in public health, that has allowed this to be really, this should be the bare minimum. We should have been able to have these kinds of wide scale efforts very early when we were hearing about coronavirus. And so this isn't just about Donald Trump. Even before that, we did not have enough efforts to make sure that our public health system had the capacity, because as the New York Times article quoted, one of the resources on this is that it's about capacity and logistics. It's not about the availability of the dosages. So if we had more of a culture of investing in public health, this could have been avoided, and we wouldn't be lauding Joe Biden for doing the bare minimum in terms of getting these vaccinations out.
Yeah, so it's interesting because because of the Ebola outbreak during the Obama administration, luckily it was contained and didn't really impact the United States too much. But they had a centralized approach in place that, of course, Donald Trump decided that he didn't want to abide by, didn't think he needed, and from the very beginning, really wanted to tackle this with every state for themselves kind of thing. When it comes to testing, let the states figure it out. When it comes to distribution of this vaccine, let the states figure it out. And so you actually see different issues depending on which state you're talking about. Some states are actually having more of an issue with distributing the vaccine. As some reporting from the New York Times indicates, at least 16 states and territories are using the National Guard, for instance, because they did not have the logistics in place. They have plenty, dosages of the vaccine. They just couldn't get it to people because they didn't have enough workers to do it. They didn't have a plan in place. Other states actually depleted the doses that they received from the federal government, and they're eagerly waiting for more. And so that's what happens when you don't have a centralized approach, when you just allow states to try to figure it out for themselves. And I like that you're right, it is the bare minimum, having a centralized federal approach when it comes to this pandemic. And you're also right that our public health system has been depleted. I mean, we have a for-profit public health model. And as a result, we didn't have enough hospital beds. We weren't prepared. It doesn't make financial sense. It doesn't create a lucrative situation for hospitals to have beds that are typically empty but are ready for a possible pandemic. And that's the wrong way to think about public health. It shouldn't be a commodified system, but unfortunately that's what we're dealing with. But Lance, I wanted to get your thoughts as well. What do you think about Biden's approach here, and do you think it's enough?
I think the slogan, 100 million COVID vaccine shots into the arms of the American people, it's nice, it's catchy the first 100 days. I'm surprised it wasn't like it's called Operation Ganesh, based on the God of many arms, because we're gonna get it into the arms of every American, something like that. I think that's all well and good, that's well to do. Something to keep in mind, who are the populations in the United States that are the most disproportionately affected by this? And that would be indigenous members of the United States, Black members of the United States, Latin members of the United States. Is there going to be a rollout program that sees them getting it, perhaps the most vulnerable communities before other people? I think that's something very important that should be prioritized. On top of that, the problem with the fact that there isn't this infrastructure within the United States, that actually comes from the fact that the private insurance companies in the US eroded public confidence in vaccine rollouts, as well as underfunding programs like the CDC and stuff like that. So I don't know. I don't want to simply lay all the blame on the private insurance companies in this case, but it would be nice to see part of this initiative obviously going towards the people that need it the most. And also the fact that we do have to go through private companies like Walgreens to do it, make sure that this isn't something that prioritizes profit over people.
Yeah, that's a great point. Actually, you're from Canada, and I didn't know that until—
Don't hold it against me, please.
Our supervising producer Brett texted me that information, but that's great actually, because we can kind of juxtapose what we're experiencing here in the United States to what you've experienced in Canada. So how has the vaccine rollout, been so far in Canada?
So Canada did the super noble thing of being a rather wealthy country, and they bought out as much of the vaccine as they could, to the detriment, unfortunately, of poorer nations that aren't able to afford it. But that being said, I do have to give credit to the Liberal government, because their rollout plan has specifically targeted groups that are the most vulnerable. Specifically in Canada, it happens to be Indigenous peoples who don't have access to the vaccine, as well as they don't have even access to the infrastructure in order to be able to get doctors and nurses to be able to inject it into the arms of Canadians. That part is somewhat good. The rollout hasn't been perfect. It's just starting right now. I think the biggest difference, if you want to juxtapose America and Canada, is the fact that not a single Canadian during the entire COVID crisis has had to worry about whether or not they should go get checked or tested if they have a cough, if they should go see a doctor. I can't even fathom what that's like, to think that if I just go in because my kid is coughing, that might bankrupt me. That never goes through your head, right, if you've got a system where it's free to walk into the doors of a clinic.
I mean, when you really take a step back and you think about not just the absolute devastation that people are experiencing right now, but what the long-term impact is going to be on Americans economically and also health-wise. I mean, it's going to have lasting consequences. And, as we've experienced following the 2008 economic collapse, if you approach this from a more, from a position of wanting to empower corporations more than anything, I think it could be absolutely disastrous, right? So there is the public health aspect of it. It's incredibly important. We're now losing somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000 people a day who die from this virus. And the fact that no one really seems alarmed by it at this point is, I get the pandemic fatigue that people are feeling, but that is a lot of people who are dying. And then people who have gotten treatment who are about to expect some pretty insane medical bills that could possibly bankrupt them. And then not only that, I mean, the economic relief that's necessary to ensure that the millions of people, tens of millions of people who are now in poverty as a result of this pandemic can get themselves out of this situation because it's no fault of their own. And what is the point of the government if they can't help rescue its people when this kind of crisis happens? But so far what we've seen is a pretty pathetic response, which is why when you compare us to the rest of the world, we're doing so poorly. But I did want to also outline the differences between the states real quick, and then we'll have some final thoughts on this. So as the Times reports, the biggest problem so far has not been the lack of vaccine in some states, but the difficulties that states and local governments face in distributing the doses that they have. In fact, some of these states have had to throw out some of their vaccine doses as a result of this. Remember, the Pfizer vaccine needs to be stored in insanely cold temperatures. It's colder than a typical freezer that a doctor's office would have. So that's been a bit of an issue. Also, capacity and logistics, as Malaika mentioned earlier, not shortages are keeping vaccines from being administered. But again, that's in some of the states. In other states, they're having issues with the amount of doses that are available. For instance, in Florida, they already used up all their doses and they're desperate for more from the federal government. So tackling this from both a logistical perspective and also increasing the amount of vaccines or the number of doses available, it's two incredibly important things. And then something that Trump didn't even consider thinking about is getting the vaccine to people who aren't able to travel. So the mobile units are also incredibly important. But any final thoughts before we move on, guys? All right. Well, we got to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're hearing more from Capitol Police who were in the Capitol when the riots occurred. So we'll give you, some sound from them, and then later in the show we'll discuss one of the latest TYT Investigates pieces about how that National Prayer Breakfast. How did they empower, some of what happened in the Capitol last week? We'll give you the details on that and more when we return.
Old school's pitched to me from Jake. It'll just be me, you, Jesus, Ben, and maybe Michael. And we're like, okay, cool. I can do that every week. As you can see, me, Jesus, Ben.
When you make the order, it says, don't exceed $20.01. So I'll just order literally anything to get it as close to that as I possibly can.
I'm sorry that I ordered $45 worth of food and got an email saying, sir, would you like to rethink that? What are you talking about?
I was in hell. I was just like, oh my God, the theater's empty, nobody's here. Everyone on screen keeps fucking cursing. Why did I let this happen? And the whole thing looks like it was shot through a glass of milk. My mom's gonna be so mad.
If you're looking for a heart attack, the short way, baby.
Wrong. I did put mayonnaise on it. I'm the most in shape, overweight person you'll find.
That's right.
He was like, why didn't you answer my call? I called you 39 times.
Yuck. But what makes you stop right before 40? What makes you say, nah, man, I ain't doing that no more. I'm cool.
And I called you back on the air. And I was like, okay, Kevin Smith, big shot. What the you said you'd come on and you didn't come on.
I'm sure I took that very well.
Yeah, you did. You called me back the next day and said, I thought it was 7 a.m. There's now deep fake porn. I don't know if you guys have heard of this.
Heard of it?
I just had some in the car. I'll tell you who I'm not f***ing. Ben Mankiewicz.
Have you guys ever felt that?
Not ever.
And now it's just the three of us.
This is the intimate hour.
By the way, the last half hour of this, we're not even rolling.
Fair enough.
Kingsley.
See, I watch movies.
I'm done with both of you.
Once Greg starts laughing, I can't stop. And I was just going to ask you about getting high.
Snoogans, Snoochie Boochies.
And members, of course, you can get the whole damn thing. TYT.com, join and free trial. I'm old school with the old folks.
Good. John, come back.
Electric cars are awesome, but they aren't the best tool for every job. You can't park them on the edge of the sidewalk while you run into the store for a few things. On top of that, an electric car is just financially out of reach for many people. That's where Zoom electric scooters come in. When I say electric scooter, I'm talking about small motorcycles with space in front of you to put your feet. The Zoom scooter has a range of 60 miles, offers a smooth ride up to 40 miles per hour, and can be charged from any electrical outlet. Start saving on gas while reducing your carbon footprint. To find out more, go to tyt.com/Zoom. Enter the code TYT50 to get an additional discount.
I'm Brett. I would like to refer to this segment as the Do I Still Have This Talent show. So I want to see if I can play harmonica without my hands. I don't know why I have that. Nothing's gonna be more impressive than that. I can also spin a basketball on my finger. While drinking. I'm gonna spin a basketball on my finger while drinking apple juice. You can do this, dude. It's also flat. I don't know if that helps or hurts. And it seems to be somewhat wobbly. Ta-da! Nope, I don't know how to do this one. This one's a fail. Nope. Oh God, I'm so mad.
Our community faces a never-before-seen public health and economic crisis. Businesses are calling Levin Papantonio with their legal questions regarding COVID-19. You've asked and we've answered. If you're a business owner and have suffered financial loss or closure from COVID-19 and have questions regarding your insurance policy, call us for a free consultation. Some policies may provide coverage for lost profits and earnings. Stay safe, and together we'll get through this.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Anna Kasparian, Malaika Jabali, and Lance of the Surfs. So let's get to the next story. Talk a little bit more about what we've learned post-Capitol riots and how the cops responded to it. So, as more video emerges showing just how severe the violence was during the Capitol riots last week, we're also seeing the situation through the eyes of some of those Capitol police officers. Now, to be clear, there were two situations going down. Number one, they were severely outmanned, and many of them had to deal with a crowd that was violent toward them. In other videos, of course, we saw evidence of Capitol Police taking selfies with these wannabe insurrectionists. And so it's important to be able to differentiate the two. But with that said, there was one specific cop who spoke about his experience, and his experience was caught on camera. So let's go to this CNN package that outlines exactly what happened, and then we'll discuss.
It was difficult to offer any resistance when you're only about 30 guys going up against 15,000.
DC Metro Police Officer Michael Fanone was in this group of officers at the west front entrance of the Capitol as rioters forced their way in. They eventually push him out into the crowd where Fanone says he was tasered several times. While trapped, the 40-year-old says he thought about using his gun to fight back.
Some guys started getting a hold of my gun, and this was after they were screaming out, kill him with his own gun. At that point, it was just like self-preservation. How do I survive this situation? And I thought about, using deadly force. I thought about shooting people. And then I just came to the conclusion that if I was to do that, I might get a few, but I'm not going to take everybody, and they'll probably take my gun away from me, and that would definitely give them the justification that they were looking for to kill me if they already didn't have made that up in their minds. So the other option I thought of was, try to appeal to somebody's humanity. And I just remember yelling out that I have kids, and it seemed to work. Some people in the crowd started to encircle me and try to offer me some level of protection.
So obviously he made it out of that situation. He was later asked, if he could say anything to the rioters who, tried to protect him. What would he say? And he basically said, well, I guess thanks for helping me, but F you for being there. But it's just amazing how, you deal with a group of people who have demonized Black Lives Matter, demonized people who agree with and are sympathetic and empathetic to the demonstrations that took place over the summer. These Trump supporters have been vicious to those people because they claim they support cops. But then as soon as they realize that, maybe some of these cops are not on our side and we're not entitled to just break into the Capitol building, they turn on them real quick. And you see that not just in that video, but in several other videos that have been released since the riots took place. So I want to open it up to the panel. What do you guys make of some of the video that's been coming out recently? Has your view of what happened in the Capitol changed at all? As we're seeing more and more evidence of the violence on the ground?
For me, it just strengthens the case that police officers, even though we have an example here of a police officer and it's an empathetic story, he's been attacked and it's senseless violence. You also have data coming out that shows that dozens and dozens of Parler videos, and Parler has been this app that has now gone offline, where a number of the far right has been entangled with mainstream conservatives, where many of those videos have been coming from immigrant detention centers. They've been posting from police precincts within, several feet of police precincts. So essentially you have these users on this far right platform that are coming from law enforcement officials. And there is a sense that, these police officers, they just didn't do their job. But for a lot of them, their job is to protect a fascist regime. For them, they are being patriots by protecting the status quo and protecting the order that we have right now. So it's very clear that things like Blue Lives Matter or All Lives Matter are meant to be obstructionist. They're meant to be reactionary. They're not about actually protecting blue lives or protecting all lives. It's about maintaining power and maintaining the status quo. So you have people who advocate so much for law and order that are now like, disorder is what we need to do.
Yeah, your analysis is just so on point. And just to provide, buttress your point regarding the cops' involvement. It's something we've been touching on throughout the week because it's so important. You want to root out, the systemic failures that we experienced, rather than immediately jump to some new policy that further violates people's civil liberties, innocent American civil liberties. So in this case, you have 2 Capitol police officers who have been suspended. We don't know the specific details of why they've been suspended, but clearly there's some sort of evidence indicating that they were friendly with these rioters. You have cops throughout the country who have been forced to resign, who are facing investigations as a result of their involvement. We shared a story with you guys yesterday about 2 cops in West Virginia who are being criminally investigated due to their involvement in these riots. And you have a cop from Houston who was forced to resign as a result of attending these riots. So this isn't just a virus that's impacting the Capitol Police Department. It's something that we're seeing throughout the country. People who have been very sympathetic to Donald Trump and his supporters, and really see them as their friends, their allies, and white supremacy continues to be a huge problem within their ranks. So that's something that should be first and foremost when it comes to like pursuing investigations. But it goes beyond what happened last week. This is an ongoing problem with law enforcement throughout the country. And so, yeah, sorry for going on and on. Lance, I want to give you a chance to jump in.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with what you're both saying. I don't like the conspiracy theory that some people propose that like there was a coordinated effort between the police and the protesters to take down the Capitol together or anything like that. I think what you see on a lot of their faces is utter confusion because this is this weird scenario. It's like Malaika was just saying, there's a lot of overlap between what the Boogaloo Boys, the 3%ers, the Proud Boys, all these like far right to white nationalist groups and police officers themselves. So in these early skirmishes you're seeing between Proud Boys and the police, it seems almost as if it's that moment where they're a little bit confused as to what to do. It's like, you were the chosen one. Like, why are we fighting? I thought we were on the same team. That's what I saw in amongst the chaos that was going down that day.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting to see how shocked they were when there was some pushback from the cops, right? Like, because it's hard for me to accept this, but the people who did what they did last week, they genuinely believe they did the right thing. Like they genuinely believe that they engaged in some sort of patriotic act to take back the government. They genuinely believe the election was stolen from the rightful winner, Donald Trump. It shows you the power of propaganda. I think that the fact that people have been, at home during this pandemic has created more of an opportunity for people to get radicalized in the wrong direction. And so you see people who genuinely believe that, their political opponents are all part of this crazy underground cabal of child sex traffickers. Even though there's no evidence of it, it doesn't matter. It's the fact that conspiracy theories have spread and been so effective throughout the last few years is really, really disturbing.
I have one question. Has Q been right about anything? Like seriously, anything? Has one drop come like to fruition? I'm not being facetious right now. Has anything come true?
I mean, Lance, you're asking a pretty big question because in order to know that, I'd have to follow every insane QAnon conspiracy theory and see if it's been debunked or proven correct. I will say that every single allegation that I've seen so far, including allegations about Tom Hanks of all people, not true. But
they got Hanks. Oh.
Everyone. I mean, it's just like the weirdest people would come up in their conspiracy theories. But again, it goes to the power of propaganda. But one other person I wanted to highlight in this story is the QAnon shaman who was seen in the Capitol building as the riots were taking place. He has been arrested, and right now, federal prosecutors are asking that he does not get bail because they do consider him a flight risk. Now, it's really strange because they cited something in order to ensure that he wouldn't get bail, but then the update to the story indicates that they have no direct evidence of this. So here's what they said originally: that strong evidence, including the shaman's, his name is Jacob Anthony Chansley, including Jacob Anthony Chansley's own words and actions at the Capitol, supports that the intent of the Capitol rioters was to capture and assassinate elected officials in the United States government. But later today, it was reported that the DOJ released a statement saying that there was no direct evidence of these groups of people who intended on assassinating members of Congress. So they might say that they suspect that's the case, and that's why they don't want to give him bail. Who knows? But he has been arrested, and it also says that The View was included in a memo seeking to keep him, who rallied people inside the Capitol using a bullhorn, in detention. And Al Watkins, his lawyer, says he loved Trump, every word. He listened to him. He felt like he was answering the call of our president. My client wasn't violent. He didn't cross over any police lines. He didn't assault anyone. So, I mean, That's what his lawyer said. His lawyer's gonna say what his lawyer's gonna say. But he's been arrested, he's being investigated. He is a QAnon conspiracy theorist, there's no question about that. And later made all sorts of allegations against former Vice President Joe Biden. Let me give you those statements. Oh, and one other thing, he did leave a note. You see pictures of him on the dais where Vice President Mike Pence was standing earlier, and he left a note there saying, quote, "It's only a matter of time, justice is coming." And Chansley later told the FBI that he did not mean the note as a threat, but said that the vice president was a child trafficking traitor and went on a long diatribe about Pence, Biden, and other politicians as traitors. So. Any final thoughts before we move on, guys?
How do you follow that up?
I would just say, as the old folks say, and some young folks like myself, I consider myself still young, don't write checks that your butt cannot cash. So on these platforms with a tinge of seriousness, but also I think just ramping each other up. I think, like you said, Anna, some folks are bored. Some people are actually malicious and they do want to cause harm. Some people just want to be a part of something. And so they see the Black Lives Matter movement. So now they're energized. It's like, well, let me just go off with my Twitter fingers. So y'all made it real life. So these are real life consequences. I'm not about expanding the police state. But again, don't write checks that your butt cannot cash.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. I mean, they broke into the Capitol building, didn't feel that they needed to even cover their identities, and made all sorts of statements on camera and then uploaded them to Parler. Like, they genuinely felt like, no, we're untouchable. We are above the law. Trump's got us. If anything, he'll pardon us. By the way, that QAnon shaman guy, he and his lawyer are asking Trump for a pardon. So I'm not even kidding. Like, it's genuinely.
Of course.
Sorry, Malika, what were you saying?
Well, he might get it. Well, how much he has like today? Well, if he doesn't get it today, then well, that's right.
So we'll see how it plays out. But for now, why don't we take our second break, and when we come back, Republican lawmakers are losing support among their constituents. They're losing their donors. They don't know what to do. I think it's time to celebrate, but also hold them accountable for what they've engaged in. We'll give you that story and more when we come back.
We get animated about the news. Yes, we're not the robots on TV. I actually care about the news. Guilty, I care.
Senator Sanders, I'm going to do something unusual. I'm going to ask you a policy question.
Hey, how dare you? That's the problem, you're the problem. Don't ever attack the Republicans. Where the is the liberal media? No, these are all establishment guys. They love the system as it is. They're all enormously rich off the system that exists.
For us, this system isn't working. So what this campaign is about is trying to create an economy that works not only for the people on top, but works for all Americans.
We're gonna rock the boat. We're gonna be counter-establishment. We're gonna tell people the truth to the best of our abilities, and we're gonna keep it real with them.
It's winter, and it's cold this time of year, isn't it? Well, it might feel chilly, and the wind might bite at your nose. Maybe you want to snuggle up with a hot chocolate, or wrap up warm and wear your biggest coat. But in the grand scheme of things, our earth is too hot, and it's getting even hotter. Our seasons are getting confused. Lots of birds are nesting earlier, and spring flowers are coming out too soon. This is what climate change looks like. It's affecting so many of the things we love, both here in our own backyards and around the world. But we have hope because we know that together we can protect them if we act now and everyone does their bit. So this Christmas, give a gift of love and show the world you care.
How in the world are you going to get the right to vote if you don't already have the right to vote? That's impossible. reason they tell you things are impossible is because they don't want you to try. It only took 7 years for that to get an amendment to get a right to vote.
Does this result in millions upon millions of Americans losing their coverage? And we've been waiting to find out, and now we know, yes, it will cut millions.
Public education was supposed to be the way to equalize everyone regardless of their socioeconomic status. But if you come from a family that's poor, how are you gonna afford grade school for your kids?
This fight is about fairness and morality. It's about the American values.
You think that black people all across the country, in every city, were all lying when they said the police abuse and the police kill us when they should? No, of course they weren't lying. Yes, it does happen. Yes, they do get targeted more.
Why are we going to put immigrants in prison for 5 years, which American taxpayers have to pay for, if we're so concerned with immigrants using up our so-called resources?
We're gonna do both. We're gonna fight Trump and we're gonna fight the establishment. It is not that hard. Yes, you can do both at the same time. Go tell them.
ShopTYT.com has new shirts like this one. And you're thinking, Cenk, what is that one? I can't see it other than the black. Yes, so I'll show it to you. If you can read this, you're not practicing social distancing. Yes! Now, you were practicing social distancing. This is over video. But overall, you get it. ShopTYT.com.
Hey everyone, welcome back to TYT. Anna Kasparian, Malaika Jabali, and Lance of the Serfs. Make sure you check out their work. And actually, why don't we do a quick plug right now? Where can everyone find your work, guys? Malaika, we'll start with you.
I am a columnist for The Guardian, so you can normally find me on there. I'm also a columnist for Gen Mag, and to find those articles, I'm on Twitter. I'm also using my Twitter finger, so you can go on there at Malaika Jabali.
Yeah, you're one of the few people I see on Twitter who doesn't really get mired in the muck. So I always really appreciate it. You usually share pretty substantive information. So everyone check out her Twitter feed, it's super important. And Lance, you have a Twitch show?
I do. You can find us everywhere. Social media is sold at the Serfs TV or our website, weareserfs.com. And I don't write for any prestigious outlets yet, but I'm working on it one day. It's a live stream.
All right, I love it. Well, let's move on to some of the fallout from Republican lawmakers essentially supporting some of what we saw in the Capitol last week. So GOP Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma has written an apology letter to his constituents, specifically his black constituents who understandably and rightly have been angered by all of the unfounded allegations of voter fraud. Now, Lankford happens to be one of the Republican senators who wanted to challenge the Electoral College votes. He was one of the first Republican senators who signed on to that effort. And when you really take a step back and you see what that effort was trying to accomplish, let's not make any mistakes. They wanted to disqualify and essentially throw out all of the votes in very specific parts of the country that just happen to be, areas of the country that most black people live in, people of color live in, and so it would disenfranchise them more than they've already been disenfranchised through, all sorts of electoral laws Republican lawmakers have successfully passed throughout the years. Now, he realized that maybe this is gonna hurt my chances with re-election in the future. Maybe it could even hurt me with my donors. So let me send out an apology. Here's what he said. What I did not realize was all of the national conversation about states like Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Michigan was seen as casting doubt on the validity of votes coming out of predominantly black communities like Atlanta, Philadelphia, and Detroit. He also writes in this apology letter, after decades of fighting for voting rights, many Black friends in Oklahoma saw this as a direct attack on their right to vote, for their vote to matter, and even a belief that their votes made an election in our country illegitimate. And he also said, I should have recognized how what I said and what I did could be interpreted by many of you, he said, or how it could be interpreted by many of you. He also said, I deeply regret my blindness to that perception, and for that I am sorry. Now, of course, he was at the Capitol when the insurrectionists broke into the building and proceeded to riot. And you should hear a little bit of his speech on the floor. So let's hear it.
People in my state in Oklahoma want their questions answered, but they don't want this, what happened today. They want to do the right thing, and they also want to do it the right way. They want to honor the constitutional process, but they also want to have debate about election security because they want to make sure it's right, which is why it's an important issue that still needs to be resolved. Transparency in government just doesn't seem like a bad idea. Obviously, the commission that we have asked for is not going to happen at this point, and I understand that. And we're headed towards tonight, towards the certification of Joe Biden to be the president of the United States.
Now, let me remind you all that there were efforts in, providing additional funding to election integrity and ensuring that voting machines weren't connected to the internet, so they wouldn't be vulnerable to hacking. This was policy that was, drafted by Democratic lawmakers. And what happened once it got to the Senate? Did Republican senators who all of a sudden are so concerned about election integrity, were they supportive of it? No, they killed it. They wouldn't even allow it for a full floor vote. Marsha Blackburn blocked it. So they were never concerned about election integrity. But before I go off, I do want to open this up to you guys because, clearly I'm not buying anything he's selling. But who knows, maybe he's persuasive to other people. I don't know.
This just reminds me of those Hollywood celebrities where they say something off the mark and their movie studio hits them up, sends them a text, and they're like, look, we might get hit at the box office, so you got to dial that back. A lot of these Republicans are relying on corporate donors who, and let's be real here, a lot of corporate donors who have donated to their campaigns for years, they've been able to throw the rock and hide their hands. They're now saying this has gone a little bit out of control. We just wanted to pass some legislation, we're doing a bit of lobbying so you can support the types of things that we want to do to deregulate. We didn't know it was going to go this far. So I am sure he got nudged, not just by his Black constituents. I don't think that's just what he's afraid of. I don't know his background or what he's been doing and who his donor base is, but I would not be surprised if that has a lot to do with his response right now. And he got into Congress around the time that a lot of Republicans were advocating for a redistricting that enabled a lot of the gerrymandering that we're seeing right now that causes voter suppression. So I am not convinced at all that he's just had an epiphany. He's been in Congress for a decade. He knows how it's been with the Republican Party trying to suppress Black people's votes and the votes of other people of color.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, especially when you consider the fact that his involvement in challenging the Electoral College votes was purely meant to be politically advantageous. Anyone paying attention to the election and all of the dozens and dozens of court cases that Trump's lunatic lawyers lost, like over 60. They lost over 60 court challenges because they couldn't provide a shred of evidence. But Lankford didn't care. Lankford decided, no, it's more important for me to appeal to Trump's base. So I'm gonna go along with this ridiculous narrative that I know isn't true because it's politically advantageous. So why would anyone believe that this apology letter isn't also meant to be politically advantageous after those riots took place. And I think you're also right in bringing up the issue with donors. I think that he is concerned about donors because he did happen to be one of the first Republican senators, of course, after Josh Hawley, to come out and say that he would also sign on to challenging the Electoral College votes. It's just absolutely gross and disgusting behavior because, again, I mean, I don't know if there's ever really been a time in America where these elected public servants saw themselves as public servants. Right now, what we're seeing is just this giant group of lawmakers who only seek to serve themselves and do what it takes to ensure that their donors are still on board. One other thing I'll just quickly mention before I go to you, Lance, is it's really jarring how well the stock market has done throughout the pandemic, but also on the day the riots took place. Like the stock market did not take a hit on that day. So all these, corporate donors that are now engaging in their own PR stunts, like, oh, we're gonna stop donating to these people. Yeah, there aren't really any elections coming up, and you're doing it for PR. Like I just feel like I hope most people can see through that. But Lance, I wanted to get your thoughts as well.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like the stock market demands blood sacrifice, is what I'm hearing. I don't think it helps Langford's case that he kind of looks like Eminem was playing a racist prison guard in the Shawshank Redemption. But on top of that, it's so rich that all of these individuals like to talk about voter fraud and how much they're concerned about it and making sure that this is the most perfect election that's ever occurred in American history, when they do so much to suppress the black vote in America. And that just seems to be a running theme. On top of which, it's also kind of hilarious that they downplayed mail-in voting so much as if it was going to be completely corrupt. There's all this evidence to suggest it's a bad thing. And then how did that work out in the election at the end of the day, right? I think the apology is hollow. I think it's opportunistic. And yeah, I think he's a ghoul. That's all I can really say on the subject.
And just for a little more context into Langford's dealings, as I mentioned earlier, he is a senator from Oklahoma, and his biggest donor is, the oil and gas industry. That's where he gets most of his money, twice as high as his next biggest donor, which is retirees and leadership PACs. So I do think that he's concerned about some of his funding, and it's not just him. Lawmakers in general are worried because, yeah, some corporations have decided to target Republican lawmakers who decided to sign on to this whole ruse and the lie of widespread voter fraud. Others are like, no, I'm gonna stop donating, period. Doesn't matter if it's Democrat or Republican. But guys, again, I know I'm speculating, so let me just clearly label it as speculation. But I have reason to believe that it's not really about what happened in the Capitol. They don't want to face they don't want to be associated with politicians who are part of what happened, who encouraged and enabled what happened in the Capitol, but it's a very temporary thing. I guarantee you, Comcast and all of these other big donors who have made these strong statements about how they're gonna cut off ties with these politicians, we have short attention spans. I guarantee you that they are gonna go back to donating money to these politicians. I guarantee it. Because at the end of the day, it's their profit motive that they're thinking about. That's why they're doing this in the first place. All right, so we have 5 minutes left. Let's get to, why don't we do the other funding story? I'm gonna actually skip ahead and go to Jay, donors, since we're on this topic. So, Republican lawmakers are panicking over the fact that some of their large donors have decided to pull their support as a result of their involvement in encouraging the Capitol riots that took place. One of the people who's really worried is the House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, who's frantically calling donors and trying to ease their nerves. In fact, one Republican donor spoke to The Hill and said this: he's trying to calm down donors. I think he's trying to assure them that they want to work with President Biden, and the vote did not mean that they won't support Biden initiatives like infrastructure, debt ceiling, COVID relief. So what they're referring to there is the vote to challenge the Electoral College votes for Biden. So, I mean, if after the riot, you're a Republican lawmaker who's willing to still move forward with that nonsense, they shouldn't receive any support, period. But you're getting these companies that are pushing back a little bit for their own PR purposes, and Kevin McCarthy's worried. So all and donors know that Kevin McCarthy is feeling the pressure. One other donor says, I think he's trying to figure out how to lead in a very difficult circumstance. He's got pressure on the left, he's got pressure from the center, as if he cares about pressure from the left. That's hilarious. He's got pressure from the right and from his members. He's doing better than anyone else could do in the conference. But Malaika, I would love your thoughts on this, because it is amazing that as we're trying to figure out what went wrong, right? Like there should be a full-blown investigation into all the failures that took place that day. Like you have Kevin McCarthy like hitting up donors frantically and trying to like calm them down to ensure that he still got their support. Because at the end of the day, those campaign donations happen to be the #1 priority.
Yeah, I think it's important here to again call attention to these corporations because they have enabled these same campaigns. They've enabled these same corporations for the past decade. They were supportive of this initiative called Red Map that was intent on making sure that votes in predominantly Black communities in states like North Carolina, they supported court cases against them, against these legislative bodies, to make sure that they could gerrymander safely. And so the Supreme Court has decided that it is okay to gerrymander certain communities, because even if it's not by race, if it's just political gerrymandering, that's okay. And these corporations donated through dark money, through these different enterprise, random 501c3s and 501c4s, they've enabled this behavior. So as much as we talk about Republican legislators, and we absolutely should put all the attention on them, we also need to be looking at these corporations who are being very hypocritical.
Well, let me name some of those corporations, because I agree with you. So donors, McCarthy has lost because he voted against the results, but they had no problem continuing their donations when he was questioning the legitimacy of the election results. Include Comcast, his top donor, $87,600 in 2020 alone. Blue Cross, $62,200 in 2020 alone, and then you have Amazon at $43,100. So again, it's ridiculous that things had to get to the point that they got to for these companies to pull their support and their funding. They had no problem with all of the other shady behavior that was taking place within the Republican Party leading up to the riots. And again, I just want to reiterate that they will absolutely go back to funding Republican lawmakers, even the same Republican lawmakers who engaged in that lunacy in the Capitol last week. But we'll continue having a conversation about this in our post-game show. So if you are a member, definitely join us for that. If you're not a member, you can become one by going to tyt.com/join. And we only have a few seconds left. So love you guys. We'll see you soon. Have a fantastic weekend.